whittling my list of things to do, I still need to get a battery box built, and I need to get my tail wheel in so that I can finish up the bottom of the fuselage. The tail wheel that I got from my RC guy, sorry, everything's kind of fixed in place and I don't want to move it, so I'll just have to show you like this. It's almost an exact fit for the plans. It's just the tail wheel itself is a little bit smaller. So before I can finish the bottom of the fuselage, I need to get this in, and before I can get that in, I need to get the fin, vertical fin in. And before I can do that, I need to get the horizontal stab in. I've leveled the fuselage laterally with a little spirit level. And then I've double checked it with my laser. And I have come back and checked the horizontal stab for level, and it's pretty doggone close as it is now. I think I'm gonna have to lower this edge just a little bit, just a little smidge, maybe like a 1/32 maybe. I've already checked distance from the tips to the little pin here, and they are both sides are identical. Not only the front, but also the aft edge, both sides are identical. So that's all looking really good. Now, one other thing, the plans have you fit a 1/8 inch ply double. I'm pretty sure it's on the inside, about 1/2 inch or about 12 mm tall, and 1/8 or about 3 mm thick. But I think what I'm going to do instead is to just put a solid balsa piece into here, so I can glue the entire stab to that. And it doesn't have to be thick, maybe a 3 mm balsa sheet will work fine. That'll fit inside here, level with the rails. One other thing to mention, the plans, it appears that these stringers, which run the length of the fuselage, are actually removed right here, and the horizontal stab just sits on top of the balsa fuselage sides, plus the 1/8 inch light ply doublers, which are inside. However, looking at the pictures of the real airplane, it appears that the horizontal stab actually sits on top of the framework, the tubing framework, which does run along the length of the fuselage like these stringers do. So I'm going to keep the stringers, I'm going to add the balsa sheeting in the center to provide more glue surface. And I think that'll help the horizontal stab and the whole tail end look a little more scale. I applied a strip of this 3 mm tape, very thin. I mic'd it, and it came out to 3/1000 of an inch. And that gets the horizontal stab, I think, about as good as I'm ever going to make it. It looks to be exactly perfectly level and at right angles to the fuselage. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to sand that small off the balsa right here. I think I'd go too far. So I might just remove the tape and leave this horizontal stab as it is. It's so close now that it might not be worth the effort, and I might actually make it worse. So this is my balsa piece that's going to fit inside. It is 4 mm. I have it cut so it slides in between the stringers. And to glue it in, I'm going to use tight bond for this. I want to have the extra working time over CA. Give me a chance to position this so that I won't have any trouble when it comes time to fit the stab. last thing I want to do back here to provide a little more strength, I want to add 2 gussets on the inside of the balsa side and the top here. So I was having a hard time figuring out a way to put the gusset in and hold it before the glue kicks off. So I drilled a little hole back here to get my pinky through and kind of hold it in place, and that sort of kind of works. I considered maybe adding a couple more holes for lightning purposes, but I think I'll just put the one in here. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get this balsa piece in without the glue kicking off too soon and gluing besides where I want it to glue. To actually get this gusset in, I'm going to glue it to my finger intentionally. I'm going to use some rubber cement. I'm just going to put a little dab on my finger, and we'll have to wait a couple minutes to get that to dry. Okay, it's been about 2 to 3 minutes, and it's glued on well enough to where I believe I can get the gusset in there, but not permanently gluing it to my finger, making it difficult to get off. Let's go ahead and try to get this glued in. All right, my finger is free. I think that worked pretty well. Let's work on the other side. For this side, I'm going to use this silicone adhesive. It dries really quickly, and it does a good job of holding. Let's see, I should probably do it to my right hand, shouldn't I? So that only took about a minute to dry. So let's put the thick CA on and try to get this side in. I fiberglassed the horizontal stab and the vertical fin before gluing to the fuselage because it's just much easier to do it when they're separate. And I went with the flow coat method for fiberglassing these pieces. At this point, the excess fiberglass had been trimmed away and all the surfaces given a light sanding with 120 grit sandpaper and feathering in the overlapping pieces of fiberglass. I masked the center section of the bottom of the horizontal stab because I did not want the primer or paint to interfere with the adhesion of the horizontal stab to the fuselage. I pre-finished the horizontal stab and the vertical fin because again it's much easier to apply the primer and sand back while these pieces are separate. As I've mentioned before in other videos, I like to use a black guide coat over the initial coat of primer because it really helps me to see all the little imperfections as I sand back that first coat. This is especially true when I'm using a gray primer because it's really hard for me to see all the little small holes and divots in that light gray color. I wet sand whenever I can to keep the dust to an absolute minimum. This is about as far as I can take this without the risk of going through the fiberglass into the wood. So these few little black areas right here, they will get spot putty to fill in, and maybe even a little, actually I think the red, I'll just go with another couple of coats of primer, but spot putty, overall not too bad. And the other side, not quite as good, bigger area up here that needs to be filled in. After a healthy coating of the Bondo red glazing and spot putty, it's time to put on a second coat of red primer. Second coat of primer has been sanded back. You know, I could probably go with another 2 or 3 coats of the Bondo and the red primer and sanding and all that. But at this point, I'm just going to put a coat of gray primer on and call it done and get these things installed on the model. Time to glue the horizontal stab on. Originally I thought about using some epoxy and some colloidal silica, but I've changed my mind. This is the back end. I want it to be light and I have a rather large area to cover. So I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue again and hopefully not get too much excess. You can see I have the sides taped off and the back taped off where I don't want it. Now I'm going to do it kind of away from the edge because I really don't want this glue to go over the edge if I can help it. I know it expands 2 to 3 times. Very thin layer here on the edge. Let's do some measuring. What I'm looking for is, was it 41 3/4? All right, they're both dead nuts on 41 3/4. I checked, the stab was right in line with the top of the wing on both sides. Next morning, polyurethane Gorilla Glue should be thoroughly cured by now. Plenty strong. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have an issue with strength here. Now, let me flip it upside down and let's take care of that excess. Both of the excess glue areas, they cleaned up fairly well. Vertical fin is just about ready. I had to shim up a little bit, a little shim here, and I need to push the leading edge over a little bit to get it to line up longitudinally. Using the laser level, everything is square. I'm going to use a couple of gussets on each side as I glue it up just to support it until the glue dries. Then they'll be removed, and then the turtle deck gets extended all the way back here, so this all gets covered up. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue again, just along the bottom here. There's a little bit of a gap, so I'm going to use that expanding foam to kind of fill this gap a little bit here. There's a little notch in here. That'll be Gorilla Glue. And then after all that's said, I'm going to go back in. This needs to be filled in later, and there are a couple little spots that need to be filled in. Okay, with those side gussets in place, it's pretty well locked into place now. Just have to wait for the glue to dry. Looking at the laser, everything looks square. The excess polyurethane foam was sanded away, and then I added a gusset on each side of the fin, and I also added one up front for the horizontal stab. Now the plan has you use the typical balsa block on each side and sanded to shape to complete the turtle deck all the way to the back, or at least back to the end of the horizontal stab. But I'm not going to do that for 2 reasons. One, I think it's a waste of precious balsa to take a balsa block and carve and sand away half of it, and then if you want to make it really light, you end up taking out some of the inside as well. And secondly, most balsa blocks of this size for this kind of purpose are usually pretty heavy, and you don't need that kind of weight in the back. So that's why I've added gussets on both sides, and I'm going to be using blue foam to finish up my fairing. I think that'll be just as strong as using the solid balsa, and it will be considerably lighter. This empennage tail feathers are pretty strong. I think they're about as strong as any tail feathers I've ever built. Before I do the blue foam part, I think I'm going to try to get the tail wheel in so she can stand on her own feet. Now, dog, this is mine. All right, you've already had your treat. This is mine. Quit wagging that tail. Quit wagging that tail. This is mine. You've already had your treat. This is mine. All right? This dog loves to chase apple core. I'll finish this apple and I'll throw the core, and it just drives the dog crazy. Would you be quiet? All right. You want this? You want this? All right. Stay. Free dog. Go, free dog. Oh, it's so wet out here, dog. Goodness gracious. All right, you ready? You ready? I think it's going to collapse. All right. Go get it. Crazy fool dog.